Forklifts are a mainstay of distribution systems. These cargo carriers are used by many people. However, if used incorrectly, these convenient machines can cause major disasters. Work accidents involving forklifts can have a variety of causes, including getting caught or entangled, collisions, and so on. You cannot assume you are safe simply because you have never had an accident before. The risk of accident is always present around us. What can we do to evade danger and eliminate all accidents? Forklifts must be operated safely and responsibly, and not only operators, but also those working around forklifts must have proper knowledge about these machines. Here, we will look at some examples of accidents involving forklifts. We hope you will apply what you learn to your everyday work and deepen your awareness of the dangers of accidents and the importance of having proper knowledge and operating with safety. Case 1. Collision with a pedestrian while reversing. Mr. A, the operator, was loading and unloading cargo with his forklift as usual. When he went to back up after unloading his cargo on a rack, he saw a pedestrian, Mr. B, standing on the right side of his forklift. Mr. A waited for a while for Mr. B to pass, then started backing up and pivoted to the left. Mr. B, who should have been passed, was actually still there. Mr. A didn't notice Mr. B and ran into him. Hit from the back, Mr. B fell down, sustaining major injury requiring 3 weeks for full recovery. Let us look at the causes of this accident. Mr. A, the operator, who was loading and unloading cargo with his forklift as usual. When he went to back up after unloading his cargo on a rack, he saw a pedestrian, Mr. B, standing on the right side of his forklift wanting to pass. Mr. A waited a while for Mr. B to pass, but then did not check properly. He thought Mr. B was no longer around, but Mr. B was still there. As a result, he didn't notice Mr. B and ran into him. Causes 1. Mr. A did not sufficiently check for safety behind him. When backing up with a forklift, there is a blind angle at the rear left. Because of this, it is important to be fully aware of this blind angle and always check for safety in the direction in which you intend to move. Causes 2. Mr. A simply assumed that Mr. B had gone past and decided it was okay to back up. It is important not to base decisions on assumptions, but to check for safety by pointing a finger and calling out before moving. Do not forget to use a guide when necessary. The accident could also have been avoided if Mr. B, the victim, had kept away from the operating forklift. Case 2. Getting crushed under a falling load. Mr. A is a veteran operator with 15 years of experience operating forklifts. As usual, he was using a forklift to pile cargo brought in on a truck onto racks. In his accustomed way, he was lifting the load and pivoting as he moved towards the front of the rack without stopping. He suddenly noticed Mr. B arranging the rack and hastily applied the brake. The load on his forklift hit Mr. B directly, causing major injury requiring 3 months for Mr. B to fully recover. Let us look at the causes of this accident. Mr. A, a veteran operator, was pivoting as he was unloading the truck and piling the cargo on the rack. Mr. B was not working in the spot where he was piling the loads, so Mr. A figured he could go ahead and didn't check for safety first. When he discovered Mr. B, it was too late. Because he applied the brakes suddenly, the load on the forklift fell off and hit Mr. B directly. Causes 1. Mr. A was pivoting as he worked to load and unload the cargo. When a load is raised, the forklift has less left-right stability. When the brakes are applied suddenly while pivoting under these circumstances, the forklift further loses stability and the load can easily fall off. If the forklift had tipped over, it could have crushed and killed Mr. B. It is strictly prohibited to perform multiple operations simultaneously like this with forklifts. Though it may seem faster, it leads to accidents, so in the end, operation efficiency is reduced. Always stop before raising and lowering loads. Causes 2. Mr. A did not sufficiently check for safety in the direction in which he was moving. Mr. A assumed Mr. B was not in the place where he meant to pile his load, and was moving as he was performing the unloading and loading operations, so his attention was focused on the load, and he did not thoroughly check for safety in the direction in which he was moving. On his part, Mr. B assumed Mr. A could see him, so he kept on working as he was moving from one place to another. When Mr. A noticed Mr. B just in front of him, he applied the brakes suddenly and the load fell off the forklift. Always check carefully for safety and do not base decisions on assumptions. This applies to the victim, Mr. B, as well. When a forklift is approaching, if you do not just assume the operator has noticed you, but call out or otherwise let the operator know of the danger, this type of accident can probably be avoided. Causes 3. No measures had been taken to prevent the load from falling in pieces. When transporting cargo that risks falling in pieces, such as loads consisting of individual objects, always take measures to prevent the load from falling apart. Case 3. Getting crushed by a falling load while using a forklift. Mr. A, the operator, thought he only needed to inspect and repair his forklift when something is not working. He almost never inspected or maintained his forklift. Then one day, Mr. A was placing one load on top of another load on a pallet. When he moved the forklift forward in front of the pallet, he realized that the load on the first pallet was off-center and asked Mr. B, who was standing nearby, to recenter it. Mr. A turned the engine off, but Mr. B asked him to raise the load a little more, so Mr. A turned the engine back on. Then he pulled the control lever toward him to raise the pallet. The high-pressure hose linking the control valve and lift cylinder burst. Hydraulic oil spurted out, and the pallet dropped and Mr. B got caught under it and was killed. Let us look at the causes of this accident. When he wanted to stack a second pallet, Mr. A noticed that the load on the first pallet was off-center, so he asked Mr. B to fix it. Mr. A turned off the engine with the pallet raised and Mr. B under the load. Being asked by Mr. B to raise the pallet a little, Mr. A turned the engine back on and operated the control lever. But as he had neglected periodic inspections and maintenance, the high-pressure hose burst, hydraulic oil spurted out, the pallet dropped and Mr. B got caught under it. Causes 1. Mr. B stopped the engine with the load raised and asked Mr. B to get under it. Regulation states that workers should not be made to enter areas where they are exposed to danger. The area under a load on a forklift is dangerous. Never enter this area. Causes 2. Mr. A had neglected inspection and maintenance. The following 3 inspections should be performed for the safe operation of forklifts on a daily basis. Pre-operation inspection performed before starting a day's operation. Monthly inspection to be performed once within each period, with a period not to exceed 1 month. Yearly inspection to be performed once within each period, with a period not to exceed 1 year. Of these, the daily inspection performed before starting operations each day is performed by the client himself and is essential for safe, efficient operation. If an irregularity should be discovered on the forklift, the appropriate measures should be taken immediately. If these inspections had been performed thoroughly, this type of accident could probably have been avoided. For inquiries about periodic inspections or the pre-operation inspection, contact your nearest Unicarrier forklift dealer. Our service staff is qualified to service Unicarrier forklifts as certified by Unicarrier's Service Technician Education Program and offers support for the safe operation of the forklift by the client. So what do you think? As you have seen, accidents with forklifts can injure other workers and sometimes even kill them. In some cases, you can hurt yourself through your own actions. What happens if you cause an accident like this? The perpetrating operator is himself subject to disciplinary action as per criminal law. He must take responsibility with respect to the victim or the deceased's family. Accidents thus affect not only the victims and their families, but they also greatly affect the perpetrating operator and his family as well. To avoid such accidents, remain loyal to the basic rule of always paying attention to what is happening around you and operate your forklift with safety.